Portland's largest plant-based Asian, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander heritage event is happening this Sunday, June 1st from 5 to 10 p.m. at the Red on Salmon Street. With over 50 vendors, there will be food, drinks, art, home goods, chef demos, lion dancers, and so much more. Plus, a portion of sales will benefit Asian advocacy nonprofit Apano, which is an awesome organization. To learn more, head over to their Instagram at VeganizerPDX. That's at VeganizerPDX. Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about the upcoming changes to Oregon's bottle bill, the latest poll shedding light on what's supposedly most important to Portlanders, and a round of speculation on which billionaire will be buying the Blazers. Joining me on this week's Friday News Roundup is founder of weekly newsletter Stumptown Savings, Bryan Vance, and our very own executive producer, John Notarianni. It's Friday, May 30th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Welcome, everyone, to the Friday News Roundup. Bryan, John, thanks for hanging out with me this morning.
Hey, good morning, Claudia.
Hey, Claudia.
Bryan, it's so nice to have you on.
It's good to be back. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. For those of you new to the show, today is a day we break down some of the biggest local stories of the week with some of the best and brightest journalists in town. But before we jump into the news, I usually ask an opening question so our listeners can get to know our guests a little better. And today's opening question is actually related to the news of an Oregon man and his cat successfully sailing solo from Oregon to Hawaii. Now, you might have heard about Oliver Widger, the man, and Phoenix, the cat's voyage already, since they gathered something like 2 million followers on social media while sailing these past few weeks. And their story also went viral and is now all over the national news. But if this is your first time hearing about Oliver, he's actually a Portlander who last year decided to quit his managerial job at a Hillsboro discount tire, where he had been working his way up for like 11 years since he was 18 years old. So that's all he knew, but he liquidated his 401k, sold everything he owned, bought a sailboat, and moved into it with the goal of sailing to Hawaii. Now, here's the craziest part. You're like, oh, so he loves sailing. No, he didn't know how to sail.
He learned on the fly.
Figured it out.
It was just a wild dream. He taught himself while watching YouTube and going up and down the Columbia. And he chose to flip the table over on his life because a few years ago, he was diagnosed with Klippel fail, which it's a syndrome. It's a congenital bone disorder where like 2 or more of your spinal bones are fused in your neck. And he was flat out told that he was like one minor accident away from being paralyzed. And yeah, imagine being told something like that, life-changing, and you're just like, wait, I fucking hate my life. So about a year ago, he started filming his journey from getting his boat to getting it all ready, all the crazy shit he had to deal with on his solo journey. And after 25 days at sea, this past Saturday, the U.S. Coast Guard escorted Oliver and Phoenix into the Alawai Harbor in Oahu, where the governor of Hawaii was there to greet him, along with hundreds of other people. His story had just really like resonated with so many of us. So my question to you both is, if you flip the tables of your own lives, what would be your wild, like, fuck this, I'm buying a boat and sailing?
So my wife and I joke about this often, actually. It would be like moving to either Turkey or Romania and starting a Turkish restaurant, like just giving everything else up and just doing that. Neither of us are Turkish.
I was about to say.
She is Romanian. Her grandmother lives in Turkey. We're both obsessed with Turkish food. Mm-hmm. We went to Istanbul last year. I absolutely fell in love with Istanbul. And we would just like quit everything and do that.
You know what's funny, Bryan, is that I had envisioned in my head you opening up a restaurant. But I had not envisioned it being in Turkey.
Right.
What about you, John?
My brain at this point is still sort of in like what I'm going to be talking about later, which is like the future ownership of the Portland Trailblazers. So maybe I just scrape together a couple $1 billion and buy the Trailblazers myself.
That would be your flip the table, as you would acquire $1 billion.
Oh, many $1 billion.
Yeah.
Several
it's
billion.
Take like 4 billion probably.
Well, good luck to you both.
John, that's a big dream.
Yeah.
You'll be like, we knew him when.
All that was keeping him back was his job at CityCast.
Yeah, who knew? Who knew?
Well, thank you both for your answers. On to the news of the week. Bryan, You looked into the upcoming changes Senate Bill 992 would bring to Oregon's now oddly controversial bottle bill. Can you lay it out for those that are just walking into this conversation? I know this was something we've been talking on the show for a while now,
Right.
but we've dropped the thread for a few months now.
It's been a busy couple months with the bottle bill. So a little over a week ago, some legislation passed that made some pretty dramatic changes to how the bottle bill operates. So there have been concerns brewing for quite some time now from businesses, from community members, from individual citizens who are very vocally worried that the bottle bill is sort of promoting drug use because of the ability for people to get quick cash from turning in cans and then go buy really cheap fentanyl on the streets. So there was a movement to make some tweaks to the bottle bill. What's happened so far is lawmakers have done something that doesn't sound that big, but it's actually pretty substantial. Businesses can now stop accepting returns at 8 p.m. Previously, the way it worked is if you were a 24-hour business, you had to accept returns all 24 hours. This actually came to a head either earlier this year or late last year when the CEO of Plaid Pantry brought up some of the safety concerns that he had for his employees, because Plaid Pantries are typically staffed by one person. And at 2 a.m, if someone comes in under the influence of drugs and is expecting to get, a return for cans like that could be really scary. So a big change is that stores, businesses no longer have to do that. Also, grocery stores no longer have to hand count. So previously, if you didn't have one of those fancy machines that can take the barcoded bags and handle it, like people were hand counting those cans for you to figure out how much was there. Grocery stores don't have to do that anymore.
They also just don't have the resources to do that.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like the margins in grocery stores are already razor thin, and then you're trying to get people to spend time doing that. But what I think is the most interesting thing, and this actually directly addresses some of the chief concerns that grocery stores have had, is for the first time, the state is going to allow specific redemption sites to open up that are not tied to like grocery stores and aren't actually run by like the bottle drop program themselves in key areas around the state. So we've technically already had one in Portland for a little while called the People's Depot that popped up during the COVID pandemic and has stuck around and has been pretty successful. Basically, that model is now going to be expanded. So the state government can now designate specific cities, specific towns where they can pop these things up and they can work with either nonprofits or businesses to stand these up. And what's cool about them is they're removed from the grocery store. So for people who are concerned about the long lines of canners, with these big bags of cans at grocery stores, like that sort of alleviates their concerns. It's also just a lot more efficient. Like when you look up some of the stuff about what the People's Depot is doing. So Amy Green of the Oregonian had a really good piece about it this week. They're only open for like 2.5 hours a day, Monday through Friday, but are responsible for like 6% of all returnable bottles in the city of Portland. So imagine what they could do if that was expanded. And the big thing that I think is really cool about it is the people who are actually returning the cans are also feeling, a lot of negative attention from their community members. That's actually part of what Amy Green's reporting dug into is they feel like they're not viewed as humans and that there's a stereotype that everyone who does, bottle drop is a drug user. I do bottle drop. I don't use drugs. And this will give them a place where they can go that, they don't necessarily have to experience the shame of the community. Like People's Depot site is pretty welcoming, has a really nice staff, and they actually hand count everything, which is really impressive. But there's a bunch of other things too. Like there's a movement to add an extra 5-cent charge to the bottle deposit. So it's currently 10 cents. That went up a few years ago. I'm not exactly sure when that went up, but went up from 5 cents to 10 cents. There's a bill that would raise it another 5 cents, and that 5 cents would go directly towards funding wildfire prevention and response. That has received significant pushback from all kinds of people,
including 7-Eleven, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, Anheuser-Busch. So you had big international companies, and local ones, and the argument they're making is that it's a tax. Where the current bottle bill system, the way it works is it's a deposit. You can redeem it. If you don't redeem it, it actually goes back to the trade organization that runs the Bottle Bill site. But this money wouldn't go back to the person who buys the can or the bottle originally. It wouldn't go back to the industry.
Yeah.
It would just go to a fund. So in that way, it is actually a tax. And that has received significant pushback from all kinds of people and organizations.
I'm pretty heartened by this. We've sort of been talking about issues over the bottle bill for several months on this show. And I feel like there was a period where there was momentum towards axing it entirely, right? Like there was discussions about that. And I think that finding a way to put some reforms in that address some of the issues while maintaining the things that are good about it is kind of a best case scenario.
Yeah.
I don't think that this is a perfect change. I think that there are some things that are still fuzzy. I think that there are some things that they missed that still need to be reformed that didn't get touched by this.
Like what?
Well, I mean, like what we talked about last time when we were discussing the bottle bill was how there is sort of this like private corporation that runs it.
Yeah.
That is able to, like you said, if the money doesn't get redeemed, it goes back to them. It sounds like from what I'm reading, that structure hasn't changed.
That has not changed, no.
And so that is frustrating. But like, on a day-to-day of the people who rely on this program and, the people who are staffing grocery stores and convenience stores that are having to deal with the processing of this. So finding some solutions for them sounds like a win.
I gotta agree. I mean, if we're talking about a quick fix, which is what they were looking for, something that they could figure out in one legislative session, I think they're accomplishing it. But I also agree, John, I'm like, you're looking for money to fund wildfire? Why don't you go to them? Why don't you go, you know what I mean, to Bottle Drop? Why don't you go there? Start there. Don't come back to us.
Yeah. Don't put the tax on the user.
Yeah.
And it was just like a weird thing to kind of, I think a lot of people were really confused about like, why were they roping those two things in? But to John's point about like, this is a solution. Is it a permanent solution? No. Is everything perfect about what they proposed? No. And I think one of the main beefs that a lot of people have with the bottle bill right now is the fact that you can return the bottles for cash, and that when you return it for cash, people can then go use that cash for whatever they want, including buying drugs. So there were a lot of people who were saying maybe it should only be redeemable for groceries. That is not in place. Like that is not something that they took up. That is not a change they made. So it's still redeemable for cash. It's just stores now can set stricter rules around when they will and will not accept returns. And we can open up alternative locations, which weirdly was not a thing that we could really do outside of a handful of like official bottle drop sorting locations. There just really wasn't anywhere else other than a grocery store or a convenience store that you could take these to. And that's about to change.
Right. Well, thanks for looking into that, Bryan. I still think that relying on our bottle bill as a safety net is not ideal.
Yeah.
It's just not cool. It's not great how it's set up for people who need more help, and it's like, go to the earth and scour for bottles. You know what I mean? It's just like, that's not cool, man.
I liked that voice you did.
Yeah, that's a great closing mental image.
That was amazing.
But let's take a quick break here, and when we return, more headlines of the week.
Looking for an AI glow-up that passes the office vibe check? What? AI that only knows the internet doesn't make sense for business. Get AI trained on your data at IBM.com. The AI built for business. IBM.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
All right, guys. This week, yet another poll has come out supposedly shedding light on what's most important to Portlanders. Now, why this new poll is interesting is because it supposedly contradicts two previous polls. But I'm here to say, no, it does not, because each poll was used to ask a different question. I'm also using reporting from both Willamette Week's Aaron Mesh and Sophie Peel, who've been following the release of each of these now 3 polls since they started coming out last month. So if you've been listening to the show the past month or so, you know City Council recently approved an $8.5 billion preliminary budget that the mayor had been working on with the city administrator for months, where they both were trying to find ways to make up for the roughly $60 million shortage in its general fund. Now, everyone knew these cuts were coming, and some of these polls ended up being heavily relied on for helping guide where these cuts would go. For example, in late April, a poll was commissioned by both Council President Ilana Pertl-Guiney and Councilor Steve Novick through local marketing research group, DHM Research, will come up again, by the way. They asked, and it seems like this is just like their standard sample size, 600 people, where they would prefer cuts to the budget. The poll showed that more people disapproved of cuts to the parks, like city parks, than to the Portland Police Department. So one of the more controversial moves from City Council's turn with a budget was to reallocate $1.9 million from the Portland Police Department to Portland Parks. To be clear, this was an extra nearly $2 million that the mayor was planning on giving Portland Police to fund not sure what, because they have yet to share what needed that extra funding. And Portland Parks was to come out of this budget cycle severely underfunded. So that was a big move, a big lateral move there. And I think it was John and I who covered this maybe a week or so ago, where a new poll, also through DHM Research, commissioned on behalf of local business interests, which included downtown property owner Greg Goodman and Cowbag Metal CEO Warren Rosenfeld. They just flat out asked people like, hey, would you want our police force to be as well-staffed as like other cities that are our size or bigger? And what they did was they polled about, again, 600 people. They showed these people the arguments for and against it. And then at the end, 68% of the voters supported the idea that, yeah, we should maybe possibly double our police force, and only 27 opposed it. Now, that was used by the mayor to explain why the police needed more money. And again, the question wasn't, should we cut money from parks? Should we cut money from, you know what I mean? Like other essential services. They were just like, hey, here's a completely different idea.
Yeah.
Like, here's an idea. Did you know that we don't have enough police compared to other cities? Which is that's a concept we should consider, But it was used kind of like in a different frame of like, there was a different frame of reference here. So that happened. That poll came out, and most of City Council was like, yeah, so that's not what we were asking. And also, if we do that, we'd have no money.
Right.
If we followed these numbers, so now what? We have no streets? Like, doubling the police force is just not possible this budget cycle. Yeah. So a new poll just came out, like literally a few days ago. And this one, you guys, came from Oregon Values and Belief Center. They're a nonprofit that, in their words, establishes a new standard for public opinion research. So they asked nearly double the amount of people, something closer to 1,200 people of both previous polls. And they found that the top concern for most people, because they were literally just saying, hey, what is your top concern for Portland? Like, the question was very much like, what do you care most about in your life here in Portland? And the thing that rose to the top, according to them, to their poll, was emergency medical response, which included the fire department. It was not the police. It was not parks. The second thing that came after that, you guys, potholes, streets, sidewalks, transportation. The third, mental health services. So trailing after those 3 things, and not by much, you guys. It's not like 50%, you know what I mean? This was like a few percentage points each. After that was then parks and then the police. Now, when this came out, the way it was framed in some of the reporting was like, yeah, see, everybody was wrong, But really, if you go back to that original poll that City Council, some of the City Council members had commissioned, you would notice that they were literally asking, like, straight up, like, hey, what do you approve of in cuts? Because they were trying to guide their choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And only 28% of the respondents approved the cuts to Portland Parks and Rec. But an even smaller portion, which was 17%, approved cuts to Portland Fire and Rescue. So if you were to extrapolate those numbers, it would move Portland Fire and Rescue, which is emergency medical response, to the very top. So that very first poll, which was asking a completely different question, actually does align to the very last poll. The one that is the outlier, because it was a completely different frame of reference, was the business interest poll. And I feel like we're hearing this from media outlets. It's like 3 completely different results. But I'm like, no, they're just all asking different questions.
Yeah, they're worded in different ways.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, Claudia, I don't think I brought this up at the time. I think I was a part of that first poll of the do you want to double the police
really?
poll?
What did you say?
Yeah, every now and then I get a message from DHM, do you want to be a part of a poll? And I'm always like, yeah, sure. This is like a pop quiz for my job. Like I've been studying all this stuff. Let's see if I can pass the poll. And it was exactly like, you know what I mean?
That's not how polls work.
John.
It is not a news quiz, John.
But it is like you described. They sort of like lead you down this path of questions. And in my experience, they ask so many questions that like you start to get tired by the end of it. And you start just being like, yeah, sure. I got this poll when I wasn't expecting it on my cell phone. And then you end up just sort of like answering whatever.
So did you vote to double or triple the police force?
I'm pretty sure that I didn't say that I wanted to double the police force, but they did keep asking. And they're like, even if it means that there's no parks anymore, are you okay with cutting the police force, even if it means that there will be no police in your neighborhood? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they do sort of ask those sort of leading questions to walk you through the thought process as well.
The thing that is really interesting to me with these 3 polls is polling data can be really useful. It can be a great way to get public opinion and public insight. But the problem with not everyone agreeing to use the same poll is you get cherry-picked data.
Yeah.
And you get cherry-picked results. And like, again, DHM is a big player in polling. They're like the leading name in polling in Oregon. But like those questions are kind of leading. I'm sure there's a reason, it's to really target in on trying to figure out what they're trying to figure out. But it's like, it's kind of misleading to then take that data and run with it and say, see, Portlanders want this, because the way that this Oregon Values and Belief Center asked it, they literally had you rank like different priorities. I took this poll and it was like, here's a bunch of different things. What do you value the most? What's most important to you? That's different than the way that the DHM poll was worded. And so trying to take that data from DHM and say, look, it shows that Portlanders actually want all this. Like, that's not what it shows. And unfortunately, when politicians do that, it causes confusion. And people, they want to trust their elected leaders. And so when they see the mayor or they see a city councilor come out and say, see, the polling data shows that, Portlanders want this. Like, there's going to be a lot of people who think, okay, that's actually what the city wants. Like, maybe I don't agree with it, but that's what my neighbors want. And like, it's just not true. And also people just don't understand how polling works. Like a 600 person sample size is pretty small.
Yeah, especially when one of those people is a ding dong like me
who tries to ace the poll. But it's like,
Wait, hold on. DHM, can you get back to us? Did John win?
Did he win the poll? What's his prize?
I want to know, did he get an A? Did he pass?
I'm still waiting on my ribbon. Yeah.
Sorry,
in the mail.
I would be interested to know how statistically significant those results are. Like how representative of the city of Portland, which is over 600,000 people, are those 600? And the same with all these, with the Oregon Values and Belief Center. Like that was one that was promoted primarily through like social media and organizations and whatnot. Like, it would be really interesting to see the demographic data for all these polls, because they're being cited as like representative of the entire population, and they're not. Like, they're just not.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you guys, thank you for letting me get a little nerdy about polls. Let's take a quick break here. And when we return, John is going to tell us how he might be buying the Blazers.
Smart Water Alkaline with antioxidant. 9.5 plus pH, now in cans.
Refreshing.
Made for every way you move.
Should I run a marathon?
Let's start with finishing that water. Smart Water Alkaline with antioxidant, now in a sleek can. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
All right, John, what do you got?
I'm talking about the Portland Trail Blazers, which are now on the market. Earlier this month, Paul Allen's estate officially put the Blazers up for sale. He passed away in 2018. Since then, his sister, Jody Allen, has, basically been the governor of the team, which is now valued at $3.6 billion. And there's a lot of speculation about who might buy the Trailblazers. Once upon a time, Phil Knight of Nike was looked at as a frontrunner of somebody who was going to buy it. In a previous iteration, he'd expressed a lot of interest in trying to buy the Trailblazers, but he's recently said that he is not interested this time around. So the big question is, who is interested in buying the Blazers? This is off of a great article that Aaron Fentress did at the Oregonian. And before I give you some of the major players, I want to sort of take a minute for people who are not big basketball heads to explain why this is important. I mean, of course, an owner is going to have a big impact on just how much investment goes into the team, whether or not they're really going for a championship or just getting the TV deals. So for basketball fans, that's a big deal. But the ownership of a major NBA team like this can have such a big impact on the region itself, right? It can determine whether or not investment goes into Portland, especially with the Moda Center looking at a $600 million redevelopment. And the new owner could have a really big stake on whether or not that happens. Also, there's just concern that depending on who buys the team, they could be moved to another city.
It happened in Seattle.
Yeah, right? And we'll come back to that. But yeah, there's a lot at stake here about just who this owner is going to be, what their relationship is going to be to the city, and what it will mean for the Trailblazers and for Portland. So in Aaron's article, he outlined a bunch of the major players of who are contenders to buy the team. And I want to run through a few of them in a couple different groups. I'm sort of grouping these into 3 different buckets. The first I'm interested in is sort of people who have a real local stake in Portland. And I think the most interesting name that's being thrown around is the Bethal family. This is the family that has a stake in the Thorns, also in the upcoming WNBA team.
Right.
They're the family that has already put a lot of money behind it. And they also own a stake in the Sacramento Kings. So there's some speculation of
I forgot about the Kings.
Yeah.
I think everybody forgets the Kings.
Yeah,
Sorry,
maybe it would make sense for them to sort of sell off this stake in an NBA team and consolidate here in Portland. So that's the first really big local name. The other, of course, is Jody Allen. Paul Allen's sister has been running the team. There's been some speculation that she might put together a group to buy it. And then there's a couple other interesting names as well. Tim Boyle, CEO of Columbia Sportswear. He already has a stake in the Thorns. So people are I don't know, maybe Tim wants to, be our billionaire buddy and buy the Trailblazers. And the final sort of interesting local name that's being thrown around is Travis Boersma, who is the original Dutch Bro, founder of Dutch Bro. There's some people being I don't know, maybe Travis.
The original Dutch Bro.
The original Dutch Bro, Travis.
Who've shown no interest, by the way, just FYI.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a long shot, but wouldn't it be funny? The second bucket is people who already have a track record of owning pro sports teams, right? Maybe don't have as much of a connection to Portland, but have already been in the market for buying an NBA team. Dan Friedkin, who's a billionaire businessman, was a finalist to buy the Boston Celtics and already owns certain other sports franchises. Stan Middleman is another name that comes up. He's a minority owner of the Philadelphia Phillies. Interesting to sports nerds, maybe a little bit less interesting for our purposes here as what's happening with Portland. And I think that gets us to the third group, which is sort of wild card billionaires who might buy the team. And I think that the craziest one there that people are sort of looking at is a little businessman named Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon. He has expressed interest in an NBA team in Seattle, but there is some speculation of if the league expansion doesn't come through and if Seattle doesn't get its own team, is Bezos potentially gonna steal the Trailblazers?
Hell no.
To me, I'm oh, that's probably what's happening. I'm just what's Bezos up to? I don't know, ruining all of our lives. That's what he's up to.
Basically.
The other one that I saw who is Bezos' ex-wife?
Mackenzie Scott.
Mackenzie Scott. Thank you, Brian. That was another play. They're like, and maybe Mackenzie Scott. Why? I don't know, man.
Because she gives away billions of dollars.
And I hope she does it because it would be so funny. Because it's clear Bezos has wanted a team. If she just buys one and it sets them up in Portland and just calls them fuck Bezos or something. Do you know what I mean?
So Bezos does get an NBA team in Seattle when the league expands, and Mackenzie gets the Trailblazers, and they just like wage a proxy war against each other.
Exactly. That's what I want. That's what I want. I'm ready to go to a basketball game. I don't even like basketball. I'm ready to buy a little finger that just says Mackenzie. Like,
who's your vote, Brian? Sounds like Claudia's in for Mackenzie Scott.
I know, for no reason other than spite.
Right. None of these people are that interesting to me and all. I mean, maybe Jody Allen, theoretically, she would team up with this guy who was a big friend of Paul Allen. Yeah. The actual owner of the Blazers who died a few years ago. And like, you know, they would no desire to leave Portland. It seems like they would be, you know, an interesting group, but like, I just don't like this whole billionaires are going to decide the fate of something. I think what would be interesting, no one's talked about this, but I think what would be interesting.
I know what you're saying.
The Green Bay Packers
Exactly.
model.
Yes.
Just go community owned. Like, it works. It's obviously not for every market, but you know what? I know that Portland is a lot bigger than Green Bay, but in terms of the NBA, Portland is in many ways seen as a small market city, very similar to the way that the Green Bay Packers are seen as a small market NFL team. The community loves the Blazers. Like, I think if there was an NBA team where you could do this, it's also not the most expensive NBA team. So good luck trying to do this with the Boston Celtics or, you know, the Los Angeles Lakers. That ain't happening. But if there was ever an NBA team where you could try to do this, it's probably Portland.
I mean, it's still $3.6 billion.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot of phone
It's
fingers.
a lot of money. But I mean, especially if you got like, okay, so maybe it's not entirely community owned. Maybe you have someone like Jody Allen and Tim Boyle and a few other, you know, mini billionaires, because these people don't have enough money to buy the team outright anyway. They're mini billionaires. They're like 1.4 billion.
Just pocket size.
And they put up a bit of it, and then you get the community to put up the rest somehow.
I want to see this budget. I need some more polls coming out.
Let's do it.
Would you support
let's do our own poll.
A Blazers team or, I don't know, a functional city?
The poll shows overwhelming support for John Notarianni owning the Portland Trailblazers. That's so interesting.
They're like, who is John Notarianni?
Where did he get his money?
John Notarianni, winner of DHM polls, is now.
That's your prize, John. You get to buy the Blazers.
I'm going to need a line of credit.
Well, whatever happens, I just hope that for the people who love the Portland Blazers, that something good happens for them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you guys, thanks for hanging out with me this morning. Before we head out, we actually got a couple of shout outs from CityCast Portland Neighbors. If you aren't aware, that's our membership. And one of the perks is you get to do this. You get to tell us some shout outs, and we're going to start doing this, I guess, every Friday.
Every Friday, yeah.
Yeah, every Friday. So Kylie D says, the Paladins League, a tabletop gaming-focused restaurant and gathering space in the Beaumont, Wilshire neighborhood, is a great family-oriented addition that really deserves more love. Connie W. recommends Nola Clay, a small pottery studio in MLK with 6-week classes and one-time workshops. That's pretty cool. I've never done pottery. And Stephanie D is shouting out Mikiko Mochi Donuts for their allergy-friendly donuts with delicious new monthly flavors. I gotta shout them out too because they're really good. Have you guys had mochi donuts? They're delicious.
I have not.
Brian, they're so good.
I don't like mochi. It's a consistency thing.
Get out of here. All right.
I also want to just continue to throw big thank yous to all the people that signed up to be CityCast neighbors during our membership drive about a week ago. Susanna Y.N., Esteban D., Ted S., Daniel L., Jesse R., Paul F., Nicole D., Amanda L., Madeline M., Mark M., Emily H., and Nicole H. Thank you so much for joining as CityCast neighbors.
Cool. Well, if you want to share your favorite local biz or nonprofit on the pod, become a CityCast Portland neighbor, head over to membership.citycast.fm. We'll read it right here. That's membership.citycast.fm. And Brian, John, thank you so much. I'm going to be sending you to a poll pretty soon about how today went.
How do you rate today's CityCast Portland podcast?
I'm going to win that poll, John.
Brian's going to win that poll, John.
All right.
I'm going to beat you, John.
Take your poll crown.
Come again.
I'm going to claim the victory.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thank you so much for listening. Our podcast production team this week was John Notarianni, Julia Fiaioni, Selena C.A. Reynolds, and Elizabeth Kama. Our Hey Portland newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan, and our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Stephen Drizos. Additional music by all the kimonos, as well as Sarah the Instrumentalist, Timothy Infinite, and Gregory David, courtesy of Epidemic Sound. We'll be back Monday morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.